We go now to the former mayor of Chicago and the former U.S. ambassador to Japan, Rahm Emanuel. Welcome to Face the Nation, Ambassador.
Thanks, Margaret.
I have so much to get to with you, but I know you worked with Senator Lindsey Graham for a time here in Washington. Yeah. You weren't exactly on the same page politically, but I wonder your thoughts on his passing.
Good observation. No, look, you lost a patriot. We disagreed, but we weren't disagreeable about it. There were three things we worked on. One, he represented John McCain. I represented then Senator Obama on the debate rules. Two, when we had a meeting during the transition, Senator McCain, Lindsey, the president-elect, myself, we agreed to work on a national service bill, which we actually got done in spring '09, that doubled the size for AmeriCorps and for the Peace Corps. And then third, our final, which was really the most difficult, but we got to an agreement, which was to close Guantanamo. It was Senator Levin, Lindsey, myself, representing administration. We got to a final issue. The Attorney General was against it, which was the trial of the Sheik, which he wanted civilian. Lindsey said it had to be military court to get the 15 votes. That's not what happened, and so therefore, and it was one political analysis, which I thought was accurate, versus a legal analysis, which was maybe by the law, but wasn't going to happen. And so we worked at my desk as the chief of staff, I don't know, kind of the dozen meetings between Carl Levin, myself, and the senator that would actually have closed Guantanamo, moved all the prisoners out, and brought that chapter to America to end. Now, did we see everything 100%? No. Did we find compromise? Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Ambassador, we need to take a break and finish our conversation about the significant speech you just gave in Israel a few days ago, but we're going to do that in a minute. I hope everyone will stay with us. We will be right back. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We continue our conversation now with Ambassador Rahm Emanuel. Ambassador, you are just back from a trip overseas. Your family, I know, has deep ties to Israel. You worked during the Clinton administration, the Obama administration on important Mideast issues. In this speech you just delivered, you were very critical of Palestinian Authority's leadership failures. You faulted Arab states for not doing more in a credible way for the Palestinian people. And then you took aim at Prime Minister Netanyahu, saying he has led his country into a dead end. What do you hope you accomplished?
Well, it was not just a criticism. All those are clear, and I stated that. I also said the United States made mistakes in the past. But I laid out a plan that gets out of Israel being a pariah. It's went from a technological prowess to a territorial pariah. And for a small nation, that's not survivable. In 22 years, it will be 100 years old. You cannot survive like this. So one, not a two-state solution, a 23-state solution, taking the Arab League's offer to recognize the state of Israel, all 21 nations, if they come to an agreement on security for the state of Israel, which is essential, and Palestinian sovereignty. That's Israel's best day and Iran's worst day. Second, building off the India, Mideast, European economic corridor, which would be the most important trade route, and put Israel's technological prowess at the center, break into the economic integration that's happening. So that was a plan. Others can offer theirs, but to me it addresses the single most important thing for the future of this alliance, that you cannot reduce your national security apparatus with military power, economic statecraft, political persuasion, and cultural attraction. Reduce three of them and let them atrophy, and your entire national security apparatus is only military power. And that's an example of how Israel has a breakout. That is good for alliance. The United States is strong with NATO. You can see that in public opinion. United States public opinion is also strong with our Asian allies. This is the only ally that is in the low 20s in support. That is not a sustainable path for an alliance that's essential for Israel, America, security.
You said the current Israeli government, the Netanyahu government, views every security challenge as a nail and Israel's military as a hammer. That sounded very similar, to me at least, to this. Listen.
You're a country of 9 million people. You can't just kill your way out of solving every single national security problem that you have.
I imagine there aren't a lot of points of agreement between you and the Vice President, J.D. Vance, but do you see this on the right and left as a major shift in policy here for the United States that does not turn around?
So two things, Margaret. in 2009, when I challenged, as Chief of Staff for President Obama, I challenged the Prime Minister directly. I didn't need this war, directly, that what you're doing on housing in the West Bank will lead to perpetual conflict and isolation. If there was a prediction I wanted to be wrong on, that was it. So telling somebody the truth, even when it's painful, that's not new to me. I was also in the room with President Obama when we funded and started funding the Iron Dome that has protected thousands of Israeli civilians. I believe funding the Iron Dome is right for America's strategy, right for Israel. I think making sure that you're not having undermining the West Bank or the possibility of a two-state solution, a 23-state solution, is also in Israel's security interest. And I want to get back to those go hand in hand. And so my view is, take Syria, for example. There's no more Assad. You have a head of Syria that is the transitway to Hezbollah from Iran of all their weapons. The Syrian head of state has said that Iran is a problem and that Israel and he should have a security agreement. Nobody's called. I said, I'll pay for the phone call charges. Pick up the phone and come to a security agreement where your northern part, Jordan is secure on the east, Egypt is secure on the south, Syria, you would actually have a security agreement. That breaks out. Diplomacy, political strategy, is dormant as a part of Israel's national security, and that, therefore, harms the United States. My number one goal, what advances America's interest? This alliance, if they don't change, the status quo today is unsustainable. I did it in the interest of America, the alliance with an ally that is isolated politically at home and abroad.
No, and to your point, I was in Syria in September, and I saw the parts of Damascus that were bombed by the Netanyahu government very recently.
And
that
you would
same
cut
government.
off Hezbollah. You would cut off Hezbollah from Iranian weapons. That's in your national security
Trump
interest.
Might be trying to do that.
Doesn't require the military.
Trump may be trying to do that.
Again, I offer my telephone card, AT&T. You can use it anytime. They can make a call to Damascus.
But bringing you back here to home, when I just finished that conversation with the current Israeli ambassador to the United States, who, by the way, very much supports Israeli settlements in the West Bank, as you know, he did take a hit there at those trying to launch presidential campaigns from his country. He was speaking about Representative Ro Khanna. And what happened to him in the West Bank. But some are saying that about you too, sir. I mean, how do you respond to that? And do you agree with words like apartheid and genocide that progressive Democrats like Khanna use to talk about the current Israeli government?
Second, I was invited by Tel Aviv University. So I took it up. And I didn't just offer criticism. I offered a plan for peace. Second, I go back to working on this, not with President Clinton, on both the Oslo Accords, the Y Plantation, Camp David, and with President Obama. And third, if it comes to where you start or how you do, I haven't decided whether I was running for president, but the first thing I did was go to Mississippi, that has moved from 49th to 9th on reading scores. I have made education the core. We as a country, 50% of our kids cannot read at grade level. And we know everybody in Washington is radio silence on the future of this country. So if there's going to be a place, it wasn't the Middle East. It was actually down in Mississippi I went. That is where the future of America is. Now, one thing I know, Margaret, about the White House, you have to be good in the situation room, the boardroom, the break room, and the classroom. And the problem for both parties is one stuck in the bathroom and the other one stuck in the bedroom. Get out and focus on the future.
Ambassador, we'll leave it there. Look forward to having you back to talk more. We'll be right back. And we're joined now by Ohio Republican Congressman Mike Turner. It is good to have you here, Congressman. I know you are a friend to Ukraine. Senator Graham certainly was, as I mentioned. He was so excited about finally getting to move this sanctions and tariffs bill. Do you think that this will go forward without a champion like him behind it?
Well, let's hope. Let's hope, as you had indicated, that is one of the legacies, that the Senate will move his bill. You know, I was at the NATO summit with Lindsey Graham and other senators last week, Senator Shaheen, Coons, Durbin, Rounds, and as we met with Zelensky, Lindsey Graham was making the point of the need for this sanctions bill that has passed the House and that I've co-sponsored and that should pass the Senate, that Lindsey has been such a champion for. It was his bill. What's so sad about losing Lindsey is that, in this debate now that we have of America first, you can be America first and still understand that it doesn't have to be America alone, that, allies want America's voice. America's voice is important. America needs to stand for freedom and democracy and liberty. And that's what they saw in the voice of Lindsey Graham, in McCain's voice and Reagan's voice. And what they saw in Lindsey was someone who was willing to stand up and say, you're not alone. America is with you. We're not going to do it for you. We're not going to come in and decide for you, but you're not going to be alone. And he was that voice with Ukraine having just gone to Ukraine saying, we're going to be with you. And this bill would be an important symbolism to say, we're going to be with Ukraine. And I certainly hope the Senate moves it this week and we can put it on the president's desk this week. As you had said earlier, he had been in touch with you and said he believed he had movement from the White House for that bill. We should pass this bill, put it on the president's desk.
Do you know if Republican leadership has considered that at all at this point?
I don't. I know that we certainly have the news where they had just said upon our return from the NATO summit that they believed that they could move this in the Senate. The House has already passed a version of this bill, so I know there's broad support. There were more than a veto-proof number of senators who co-sponsored it. With the White House's support, this bill could be on the president's desk this week.
Let me ask you as well about NATO. You had voted for a bill years ago, CATSA we'll call it, that would challenge what Turkey had done, which was buy this Russian weapon system. And President Trump said this week that he's okay with lifting some of the sanctions and letting Turkey have the F-35 fighter. How could that happen and not violate the law that you supported?
All right, so you're speaking of the S-400, which is the Russian air defense system that Turkey had purchased. And during that time, Congress had passed, which had been signed into law, a bill that would restrict the president's ability.
In the first Trump administration.
Right, and to waive sanctions that were placed on Turkey, including it had taken them out of the F-35 program. Turkey has signaled that they are now in a position that they want to comply with that bill that would put them in a position where the S-400 would no longer be an impediment to their entering back into the F-35 program. I certainly hope that occurs.
They'll sell it to
the information, I can't disclose what they had told to us, but it's very promising. Of all the senators, we agreed together that we would be able to publicly say what we heard was very promising. And Senator Shaheen has said, she was one of the original authors of this. She believes it's promising. If they do this, and to get them back in the F-35 program is incredibly important. They're a member of NATO, a very strong member of NATO, having just, of course, hosted the summit, which was very successful. I certainly hope that they follow through and that they do so in a manner that returns them. They were also a producer of parts for the F-35. So entering back into production would be very, very important.
I want to ask you about some other things on the domestic front as well. Late Friday, Homeland Security made an announcement that they're going to change, they want states to change the way that elections are conducted, or if states refuse, they'll lose millions in federal terrorism prevention funds. So there were a list of things in there, including switching to paper ballots, which like nearly every single state has a paper backup system at this point. What do you think of this federal pressure to get states to change their elections?
Right, so I'm not really familiar with this announcement. Obviously there is concern in Congress of federal intervention on the election
as a conservative,
side,
you must
on the state side. But at the same time, there is also, or America First, the provisions of the bills that are moving through the House that relate to ensuring that we have identification for people to prove that they're American citizens, mail ballots, as the president has made as a portion of his provisions that he's continues to.
He wants to change all these things.
All of those things are of concern, and certainly we have to address them.
You're how many days until the midterm elections? At this point, that's not really
The House
practical.
has passed these provisions several times, all of which I have voted for.
We
I
noticed
think
that.
I think the Senate does need to move these provisions.
But did you vote for it knowing that the Senate doesn't have the votes to actually make it become law? Vote yes, hope no.
I think the president is certainly making a very good case as to how these provisions need to become law, and I think that they are ones that will ensure for the American public, integrity in voting.
Well, non-citizens can't vote in federal elections. That became law in 1996.
The concern is how do you ensure that that's going
which each
that is
state
occurring,
does,
and we need to make certain that we ensure that occurs
at the state level.
I'll
let you go on that. But
having identification should be
yes.
at least the way to ensure
yes,
that someone that we know who's voting.
Yes.
How do we have? I mean, there's
well,
so many things that you have to have identification for. How do you let someone vote and not even have an identification? I can't understand how anyone would be opposed to that. And this is one of those things where it's off the charts. The American public believe that people should have identification to vote. This should pass.
Yeah, and that's often required when you register. Very quickly, do you know what the plan is to deal with the Haitians who are having their temporary protected status revoked in Springfield, Ohio?
So as of Friday, there's been a short-term extension because of
the 24th of July.
So of 2 weeks. The Margaret Emanuel secretary has said that those individuals who are working, that they should look to as a manner in which they might be able to be included in other processes because they're contributing to society. Yeah. Certainly, our governor, Mike DeWine, and myself and others who have individuals in our community who are going to be affected are certainly advocates for these individuals to be able to stay in our communities, who are working and contributing. They're valuable people in our community,
and you voted for Congress to extend. We
certainly hope that they can stay and be able to contribute to our communities.
We're going to continue to track that and whether they have that hope beyond the 24th of July. Congressman, thank you for your time. We'll be back in a moment. We go now to the former commander of the U.S. Central Command, retired General Frank McKenzie. General, welcome back. I was just looking back at my last conversation on Face the Nation with Lindsey Graham, and the senator said, if this deal fails, President Trump is going to take the Strait of Hormuz over by force. The U.S. will control the Strait of Hormuz. That was 3 weeks ago. How does the United States end up controlling the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, Margaret, we certainly have the capability to control the Strait of Hormuz if the president chooses to follow that course of action. Look, what he's been trying to do is get to a diplomatic and a political solution here, which I applaud and I think we should all want to see as the final end state. Nonetheless, the fact of the matter is the Iranians generally only respond to military force and to extreme pressure. Look, we're not talking about regime change here. What we're talking about is modifying the views and actions of an extreme hardline regime. That is possible. We have the capability to do that. That capability is resident in the U.S. military, should the president elect to employ it. That would include opening the Strait of Hormuz, maintaining the Strait of Hormuz open, and in fact seizing Karg Island, should we elect to do that. And I would just say as an aside, that's something we should think about doing because possession of Iranian soil would be a significant factor in future negotiations with Iran. So all those options are on the table. I'm not sure where we're going to go with this, but I do know we have these capabilities.
We have those capabilities, but the president has made clear he kind of just wants a deal here. How do you explain to the layperson when the president says we control the Strait of Hormuz, but then CENTCOM says military forces are positioned to ensure freedom of navigation, which makes it sound it isn't exactly free-flowing traffic here?
No, it's not right now because we have not deployed all the capabilities that we have to open the strait. We certainly can do that. It would require putting warships up into narrow waters. Look, the U.S. Navy doesn't love to do that, but they're very good at it. And if necessary, they can do it, and they can do it well. You've got to go back to the basic principle of Iranian statecraft, which is regime preservation. If you want to gain concessions from Iran, you have to directly pressure the regime, and you have to do so in a way that perhaps is existential to them. We have those capabilities should the president choose to go that way.
Do those capabilities need to involve ground troops? And have you been at all surprised by the amount of pain that it appears the Iranian leadership is willing to take on here while turning down all the financial incentives the Trump administration is offering them?
Margaret, given the history of Iran and their negotiating posture over many years, I'm not surprised at all by the current Iranian posture. A former CENTCOM commander once said, you know, Iran has never met a war they could win or a negotiation they could lose. And that's very true. What Iran wants to do is extend negotiations in time, arguing about the size of the table, who's in the room, the font on the document, everything about except the core issues. We need to recognize that, and we need to be prepared to pressure Iran to negotiate on the real germane issues. And by that I mean opening the Strait of Hormuz, some movement on ballistic missiles, some movement on support for proxies. All those things we are capable of getting some form of movement on all those things. We just have to be willing to put pressure on Iran in order to achieve those goals.
I mean, Jordan said overnight 3 missiles fell into their territory. There were no casualties, according to CENTCOM, but they're firing off at Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman. They continue to be able to target American partners and places where American troops are. Does that surprise you?
It does not surprise me at all. What surprises me actually is, not surprises me, but what gratifies me is that Iranian attacks have not been larger or more capable. Many years ago, when we war gamed scenarios like this, we assumed the Iranian response would be more robust. The fact that it is not more robust is a testimony to Admiral Cooper and Central Command's ability to go after these targets and make it hard for Iran to fashion, cohesive large strikes against our forces. Now, look, these strikes are going to continue. This is not a bloodless endeavor we're embarked upon. And bases are going to be hit, and buildings are going to be destroyed, and tragically, people are going to die. And if we're going to stay in this game and continue to confront Iran, which I believe is in our interest to do, we've got to be prepared for this.
Quickly, your thoughts on Senator Graham?
Senator Graham was a great representative of the state of South Carolina and our nation, a great voice in the national security space, and a particular friend to the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. Over many years, he's done a lot of great things for our school. In fact, he embodies the concept of the citizen soldier. The person who isn't a professional military officer pursues a broad, deep, public professional career, and yet dons the uniform and serves his nation. That's what we seek to produce at the Citadel. No better person to emulate than Lindsey Graham, and we will miss him dearly.
General, thank you for your time. We'll be right back. Before we go this morning, a note on Senator Lindsey Graham, a fierce Ukraine supporter who had just returned from his 10th trip to that war zone at what was a key moment for one of his proudest accomplishments. I spoke twice by phone on Friday with Senator Graham while he was in Kyiv, and he told me it was a big day. He was excited to share the news that the Trump White House had finally given him the green light for Congress to move his long-sought bill to put significant financial penalties on the biggest buyers of Russian oil. He had just met with President Zelensky and said that while he didn't want to get ahead of Trump, he believed that the U.S. president now sees the Ukrainian leader as more of a winner now. Graham wanted me to know that Senator Blumenthal, his Democratic colleague who he had partnered with on the bill, deserves a lot of credit. It was a rare act of bipartisanship in a hyper-partisan time, and it had shades of the type of across-the-aisle work he and Senator John McCain used to broker with another Connecticut senator, Joe Lieberman. It was almost exactly 1 year ago to the day that Graham and Blumenthal had joined us on Face the Nation to talk about their bipartisan effort to pressure Russia through sanctions and tariffs on buyers of their oil.
We're going after the people who keep Putin in business, and additional sanctions on Russia itself. This is truly a sledgehammer available to President Trump to end this war.
Following Graham's passing, it falls to Republican leaders in Congress to make the decision on whether to take it up. Graham had just appeared with us 3 weeks ago to push another big goal: turn the morass of the Iran war into an opportunity for normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel and a brighter future for Palestinians. He'd worked with then President Biden to try to get that done, but the work was stymied by the horrific attack of October 7th. That unfinished business also now lays waiting. That's it for us today. Thank you all for watching. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.